We'd like to thank our sponsor, iZotope, the absolute leaders in intuitively designed plugins for audio restoration, mixing, and mastering. At iZotope.com, you'll find a plethora of tools and suites that will enhance your audio production, whether it's voice, video, podcast, or a full production recording session. Check out the industry standard audio repair tool, RX11, or the multi-tool mixer plugin, Neutron 5, or the powerful Ozone 11 mastering suite, plus tons more. Go to iZotope.com and use the code FRET10 at checkout for 10% off. That's FRET10 to get 10% off at checkout. And again, the website is iZotope.com, IZOTOPE.com.
I joined a project that was never going to be my own.
What's happening, everybody? Thank you so much for tuning in to Hyphenate with me, your host, Randy Randall. This is our show for Thursday, July 3rd. Happy 4th of July for all those who celebrate. What a year. What a country. What a place. America. Or what's left of America, or what used to be America. Or this is just how it is now, and it sucks for some people and is probably a dream come true for other people, and maybe can be something better than it was, but it's got to get broken before it can be fixed. I don't know. Many points of view on where America is on this, the birthday of the country. What are we going at here? I don't know. 250 almost years? When is the 250 celebration? I guess that'd be 76. So 76 to 2006, that's next year. Is that right? If we're calling it 1776? Okay. It's me doing math in my head. I don't know if I'm right. On today's show, I'm very happy to welcome guitarist, musician extraordinaire, Mr. Jeff Schroeder. Jeff was in the band Smashing Pumpkins. He now has an awesome band with William from William Cashon from Future Islands. We played a show, when was that? Back in April. I opened up for Jeff and William's ambient guitar project with my own solo ambient guitar project. We also had Dream Crease on the band, on the lineup as well. Played at Permanent Records back in April. You can follow Jeff on the Instagrams. His handle is JJJ, 3 J's, 1 Schroeder. SCHROEDER. Jeff Schroeder on Instagram. He is playing all kinds of shows. He's out there. He's got a show coming up end of this month, 2 shows with Adam Miller from the Chromatics at the Philosophical Research Society, and then also at the 4-Star Theater in San Francisco. Jeff Schroeder will be playing before Adam Miller of the Chromatics. The San Francisco show is July 26th. The LA show at the Philosophical Research Society is July 20th. Go get your tickets. He's also going up to, he's doing a whole West Coast tour. Look at this. July 24th in, where do you call this? July 24th in Seattle. Hey, I've been there. And then looks like July 23rd at the Hollow Scene. I know where that is. That's in Portland, Oregon. Holy moly. He's also playing July 9th, coming up next week at Gold Diggers in LA with Omo Cloud, Moon Daddy, and Kai Tak. Jeff's awesome. It was a really great chat. I feel like I've been having many Billy Corrigan-esque conversations. I talked with Juan from Abe Vigoda and all of his projects. Talked with Juan Velasquez a couple weeks back about his thoughts on the Pumpkins. And so now we have an actual ex-Pumpkin on the band, or on the show. Also talked with David Pajo from Zwan. Maybe I'll just, but at some point, just hit up all old Smashing Pumpkins musicians. So open invite. If you've ever played in Smashing Pumpkins and want to have a conversation, I will talk to you. I met James Eha once, kind of like with a grunt, begrudgingly. His wife and my wife were part of a mom's group on Facebook, and his wife was having like a yard sale or a kind of flea market sale. I think she does vintage clothing, and we went over there to buy clothes or just hang out or support the moms in our area. And our oldest was very little at that time, and then they had little kids and they were running around playing soccer in the back, and I was kind of helping them make sure that soccer ball didn't go over the fence and just keeping them busy while the moms were selling stuff. And James kind of came out and sort of grunted at us in our direction and then walked away. So I'm sure he's a very nice guy. I'm sure he just wasn't stoked to have a bunch of people running around in his backyard. Or at least that was the feeling I got at the time. Could be wrong. James, you're invited if you'd like to talk about flea market sales at your house. But yeah, thanks, Jeff, for coming on. It was great talking with you. And yeah, hope everybody's having a good summer. I hope, we survive as a country, as a community. I don't know. This fourth feels wrought with tension and dissatisfaction and protest and action. I don't know. It just seems like the idea of the America that I grew up with has been co-opted and changed. This idea of, give us your poor, starving, huddling masses. And I don't know, it was a long time ago. I guess these were the ideals that America was founded on. Not arresting people, not kidnapping people off the street, regardless of their immigration status. Not having a Gestapo-like private police force who are masked and unidentified cars just pulling random people off the street and deporting them or sending them to horrific prisons in other countries. I don't know. That doesn't sound like America to me. But you know what? It's a country that we all participate in. Supposedly this is a democracy. And if you don't like it, you can vote. And I have voted and I do vote, and we can protest. And I have protested, and we will continue to protest. And there's definitely a part of my brain that wants to be positive, even in light of all of this stuff, and just think this is maybe the breaking point where it'll become unworkable and will crack this idea of, this type of oligarchy and capitalism run rampant to the point of either the country ends or the country has to be rebuilt in some way based upon mutual respect and I don't know, something better. Maybe I'm being Pollyanna. I don't know, as I say it out loud, I'm just going, oh God, when does anybody care about mutual respect? But I have a faith in this, and maybe it's not our generation, but it's the generations to come who will learn from all of these mistakes and this horrific state of the country now and find the pathway to a better world. That's what I'm going to say. That's my wish for this 4th of July, 2025, that let this be the bottom. Let this be the bottoming out of this American presidency and mindset and start the journey to a better America. I could wish that. I could wish that. It's hard. It feels bleak. It feels nihilistic. There's a part of me that feels a lot darker than that, but I'm gonna try to keep it positive on this 3rd of July, 2025. Anyway, Jeff Schroeder, beautiful musician, makes beautiful music. Go see him live. He's coming up the West Coast this month of July. Find him on the Instagrams, 3 J's, 1 Schroeder, JJJ Schroeder on Instagram. Follow him. Tell him Randy sent you. And go see some shows. If you're going to be in the San Francisco, Seattle, Portland, Los Angeles area, he's coming to your town, and you should go see him. All right. Be careful. Don't blow your hands off. Don't blow your fingers off with fireworks also. Maybe the pinky finger. I mean, little finger or baby toe. But in general, try to keep all your appendages attached to your body when using explosives to celebrate Independence Day. Okay. Jeff, thanks so much for coming on Hyphenate. How you doing, man?
I'm doing great. How are you today?
Good. Yeah, it was great getting to see you play the other day at Permanent. Tell me a little bit about that project.
Yeah. So no, first of all, your set was awesome, and it was
Oh,
just such an honor to share the stage with you because being a long time, all lifelong Angelino, your work and with No Age especially was, you know, very much part of my world at one point. So it
whoa.
was just so really cool. Yeah. Um, but so this project that I'm working on with William Cashian from Future Islands is that we played duo Saturday night. That was our first performance, and so William and I had just become friends over the last few years, and just talking about music and realized like we're both into a lot of experimental ambient guitar stuff and Robert Fripp and Brian Eno and you name it, all that kind of stuff.
Oh yeah, the
And
good stuff.
and yeah. And we just always been talking about doing something together. And we've tried working on some rock songs, which is great.
Hmm.
And but to do rock music, it requires a lot of like heavy lifting. You have to have like even if you're working in a virtual framework, you have to have a band or you have to create a band on the computer
Hmm.
with different things. Um, and I think neither one of us are natural songwriters. Like we're not singer songwriter kind of guys. Like, hey, I got this song and let's do a version of it. I think we're both kind of, hey, we jam and then um, you mind things up, but then you're looking like, well, who's going to sing? We're both not singers. And so I think that once we decided to do something more experimental, like where, hey, this is actually it, we're just going to play guitar and do things, it just started flowing very naturally because here it is in the room. This is a self-contained unit. And I really like that. So it's really fun. And so we've been getting together over the last few months, and because the nature of what it is, we just plug in, turn record on the computer, and just we have, I don't know, like 8 hours, 9 hours of us jamming. And so we've been going through and finding, going to find the best 30 minutes of that or so, for 30, 45 minutes, and put out a record of that. So we decided, hey, let's play a show because William's going out on tour with Future Island, so he's going to be leaving. So we said, let's hurry up and book a show and just go play live. So that's how it all kind of came about and where it exists at this point. So it's very in its infancy stages.
That's so cool. What a fun idea. Yeah, I mean, I relate to so much of that, too. Just the idea of, I think that's sort of where my solo guitar stuff has grown out of it too. I think just that kind of feeling of like, well, I don't really want to sing. I don't want to sit down and do my best
Yeah.
Bob Dylan impersonation. I think there's some people who can do that and do it very authentically and it feels very
Yeah.
real. But
Yeah.
if I were to sit down, I mean, I basically play what I'd be playing, at home when I'm by myself. I mean, it's kind of a mixture of things that I've just been how I practice at home and how I just kind of jam at home. So I was like, okay, I can just sort of do that in front of people. It's
No,
one of
that
those
makes a
things.
lot of sense. I was going
Yeah.
to ask you, after being like, for me, part of my motivation for doing like these type of solo performances, because I've been playing by myself too, just by me, and
Hmm.
it's very liberating after being in a band where it's a lot of just organizing other people's lives, other people's schedules, other people's wants, needs, desires. That it's very liberating to show up just by yourself, you, a guitar, pedals, couple amps, and you just play.
Oh my God. Yeah. I mean, the first couple of times I've done it, I think I was very much in that position too of like, how small can I get this rig down, in terms of how tiny can the pedal
Yeah,
board be,
yeah,
but still have enough, enough pedals on there to have fun and just make it very transportable, and it was exciting when I first figured it out. I was like, oh, I don't need much at all. I was always, I'm sure you've seen this too on your years on the road is, you'd pull up to an airport and you're like, I think like those guys are DJs. They just have a backpack. They just have like one suitcase.
I
or
know.
you get transported in the same van or the same bus with, at a festival, they pick up all these people and we're loading guitars and gear in the back. And there's just the guy with a
Yeah.
laptop. I'm just like, you know, as much as I want to hate on this, they're doing something right. Their life looks very easy right now. And then, cause I've seen them with the headphones on, like, oh, I'm just mixing a song. It's like, it's an hour drive from the airport to the hotel. Like, I'm just going to go ahead and mix a song. And I was like, oh, I want to hate these people. but I have to admit, this looks easy. Maybe I'm
Isn't
just jealous.
yeah. Yeah, isn't that cool? I know they have the laptop. They have a self-contained world and a flash drive, a memory stick, or something, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, you know, I love Robert Fripp and have gotten just so much personal inspiration from him. Just as I mean, because he's just a deep guy and very intelligent and very well read and very philosophical in his thinking and looking. And for both of us having have had careers in music, once you m- reach different points in your life in your career and you're like, what the fuck am I doing, like what am I going to do now, what's next? And I think it's natural to look to your heroes and go, well, what did that person do, or what did they do in their career? And Fripp, after kind of just couldn't take King Crimson, became like this monolithic thing, and he had this existential crisis. He'd started doing the Frippertronics, which, for even though it was a lot of stuff these days, but compared to what it would take to play a King Crimson show, it was like, I can play by myself. I just have these two tape recorders, a pedal board. I could play at a record store. I could play at a club. I could play in the record company office. And so I think that was very liberating for him to be able to be mobile like that.
Hmm.
And so I think that for me, I really like that idea that I mean, I don't even use a real amp. I go DI, so I don't even have to
Yeah.
worry. I can just get on a plane, one guitar or pedal board, and go. And I like that. I like that idea of freedom.
Yeah, I did a few tours like that with the no amp thing, and there's enough amp simulators now, or even just
Yeah,
DI in a box kind of feelings, of stuff you can get great tones
yeah.
out of things, and it does for travel. It just makes it so much easier. I think that show it was local, so I was like, oh, I have a couple of practice amps I like to bring. I have that ZT, which is always just fun to push air in
I
the
know. I
room.
was so jealous of that ZT. I love because I'm such a Sonic Youth nut. You know what I
Oh
mean?
yeah,
Just see the
same,
Lee. As soon as I saw,
same.
I was like, he's got the Lee Ronaldo ZT amp.
Though those guys are so nice too. At the company, I think they reached out, or we had played a show in San Francisco, and I'd met some of the
Yeah,
people from ZT, and they mentioned like, oh well, we make this, we make that, and I was looking at the page and I saw Nels Klein played it, and right there, okay, Nels is a pretty good
yeah,
for tone and for compact, easy carrying stuff, and then the Lee Ronaldo one, I was like, oh, I'll check that one out. That sounds fun, and they sent it, and then he was like. He's like, if you like it, you can hold on to it. It's X amount of dollars, he's given an artist price. And I was like,
yeah.
all right, I'm not gonna send this back. It was
Yeah,
one of
I
those
know
kind of
they
moments. I
got
was
you.
like,
Once
yeah,
you got it, you're like, are you gonna pack it up, put it in a box, go take it to
no,
UPS?
no, it wasn't
Yeah,
cheap, but by that point, I'd already like
no.
thrown the box away and fell in love with it. So I was just like, no, it's mine now, and it's kind of become my go-to for everything. It's this tiny
And
little
what I
loud
and
amp
I
in a
would have
box.
to assume it's
Yeah.
pretty loud, right?
It is, and it even has an external out if I wanted to even push, a bigger cab.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm
yeah,
often I'm often only going to 3 on it, which I love. I love a loud amp, but at the same time too, you know what I mean. Just having all that headroom in it again makes it really nice. I saw this funny post. Again, I'm always kind of just on guitar blogs, guitar social media stuff, and somebody said, "What does it mean when an amp takes pedals well?" It was this kind of thing of like, well, what does that mean? Like, there shouldn't all amps take pedals well? And there was a funny kind of discussion. I was reading through the comments, and I was like, I think it has to do really with headroom. You know what I mean? It's this kind of thing of like a solid state, easy practice amp with lots of headroom, meaning lots of volume that just doesn't turn into mush. You know what I mean? That you can still kind of get a loud,
yeah,
clear,
yeah,
articulated. Those because but there's some great amps like those old practice amps, those old like tube,
yeah,
Sucros and Fenders and things. They're not necessarily pedal. I wouldn't say those take pedals well because they have all the tone in the head. You have a 5 watt
yeah,
little
yeah,
practice amp, and then you don't want to. I would never put a pedal in any of those. Like that's its own built-in sort of like ecosystem.
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
not going to put a big
I think
muff
when
on a
people,
tiny little amp. Yeah,
yeah, I think it was when people say it takes pedals well, they mean it's. Are they talking about like the pedal platform, man?
sure.
Meaning, that
It's flat.
you can start with a very kind of benign, clean sound, and you can kind of shape the sound with your pedals.
Hmm.
And there's all that, like you said, the headroom to use different levels of distortion and drive to kind of get there. But you know, like a lot of those amps that would, I and when say an amp doesn't take pedals well, it just means like not overdrive pedals or distortion pedals most of the
Sure.
time
Right,
because
right.
like say like if you're using I like to play through because I was like through old Marshalls, you know what I
Mhm.
mean? And you use like a tube screamer or overdrive because the amp's already distorted. And so
Mhm.
you're using it just to get more. You know what I mean? Which is a different thing, but your big muff into already distorted Marshall is not gonna sound good. You know what I
Right.
mean? So it
Right.
doesn't take that pedal well. You know what I mean? Or I notice I really love like the JC Roland amp,
Oh yeah,
for
the
clean
jazz
and
chorus, jazz chorus
yeah,
things.
and
Yeah, yeah.
distortion pedals sound terrible. Terrible. You know what I mean? Like just terrible.
Yeah. But if you have a little like preamp in a box or kind of a preamp section or something that has its own kind of soak and compression and all
Yeah,
that other
yeah.
stuff in there, then there you can kind of recreate that. You're basically it's like a power amp with some shape in front of it. It took me
Yeah,
so long to
yeah.
get. I mean, I'm sure we're nerding out with more than most people could even bear to
They're
just
like, "What are you guys talking
bear with
about?"
us non-guitar people. But I mean, this is the kind of stuff that definitely took me years and years of playing to even understand.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But I think you fall in love with just the like, I don't know, looks cool, sounded good when I plugged it in. But where do you come from? Where did this all get started when you first start playing guitar?
Well, I'm from California, SoCal, out in
Okay,
the suburbs, Orange County,
cool.
and I think I was, when I think about it, being an older statesman now, I
We're probably about the same
started.
age. I'm in my 40s.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I just turned 51,
Oh, there
so
you go. Okay.
yeah, so I started playing guitar kind of during one of a seismic explosion of guitar in the 80s,
Hmm.
where um, I think you had a confluence of playing technique, gear,
Hmm.
expansion, and so it was a very exciting time. So I was lucky. So I probably started taking lessons in 86, 87. So you could imagine what guitar culture
Oh yeah,
was
lots
like.
of gray fuzzy Tolex, or I don't know what you call
Well,
it.
yeah,
Gray
the
carpet
Fender
on the
M80.
amps.
Remember the
Yep.
Fender M80
Oh
amp?
yeah, those are
Those,
great.
yeah, yeah,
Yep.
yeah,
Lots of
yeah.
those
They had the gray
buttons.
carpet on the side.
Yep.
Yeah. Um, but I was lucky I grew up in La Habra,
Oh, okay.
California,
Yeah.
and yeah, which is near
I
Fullerton and
Yeah.
Brea.
I
Yeah.
grew up in Walnut, so just up the
Oh,
57.
okay.
So yeah,
Yeah.
not too far from there. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. And I was in the guitar store one day looking, and this weird, freaky looking guy comes up to me and so he's like, "Oh, you play guitar? What do you like? You like Van Halen?" And I was like, "Yeah, I like Van Halen." And so he sat and he plugged in this guitar and started playing like Hot for Teacher, Eruption, note for note, and right in front of my face. I'd never seen anybody like do it like right in front of you. And he's like, "Oh,
Yeah.
I teach guitar lessons here." And so I went home. I was like, "Mom and Dad, like, can I please take guitar lessons?" And so they were, my parents were always, even though we were very lower middle class, they always found a way for me to be able to do that. And I remember exactly how much it cost back then: $42 a month for
Wow.
lessons.
And that's
Yeah,
for a week or for a month, once a
yeah,
week.
4 lessons a
Amazing.
month. And
Amazing.
but what was great about my teacher's name, this guy is named Dave Koval, is he was really an alternative guitar player. He was into um, Echo and the Bunnymen and things like the Yardbirds, and he wasn't a metal guy, even though he could play that, because I think he was more like a Scorpions, Uli John Ross,
Mhm.
70s metal, Richie Blackmore, that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. So I was lucky that I started learning like what people didn't call it alternative guitar back then, because that term didn't really become something of currency until maybe the 90s. It was like back then it was like new wave or modern rock, or what I mean, whatever they called it. You know what I mean? But so we kind of went through these different styles where he'd be like, "Okay, I'll show you this Dawkins song, but let's learn something by the Yardbirds, and how have you heard, Killing Moon by Echo and the Bunnymen?" And you would learn, so I think that really was lucky that it played into things that I liked, because I did like I loved, even when I was a kid in 84, I loved The Edge and U2. And so I love that kind of guitar sound, but I love Randy Rhoads and Ozzy Osbourne and these kind of things. So I think working through those different kind of styles of guitar was obviously something that later in my life, when I joined the Smashing Pumpkins, I was very well, I was fluent in both styles. You know, I could play alternative stuff, I mean, our new wave stuff and heavy metal, which is basically the Pumpkins guitar style, falls somewhere in there. Yeah. So that's where I came from. Those were my beginnings, you know, and yeah.
That's cool. And then
But
did you start a band in high school, or were you
I
playing?
did. I mean, I played with some friends, just a cover band for the most
Okay.
part. I think we did have a few originals, you know, and it was still kind of post hard rock metal,
Okay.
kind of stuff. And then, you know, I my senior year was 91, 92, so you could imagine how the world changed kind of
Sure.
there. You know, it's funny because I have these distinct memories of starting high school in 1988, and I mean, there was everybody had a Guns N' Roses shirt on. Like that was such a big record. That song, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
then by 92, it was everybody was not everybody, but you know,
Sure.
it
Uh,
really changed where it
Popular
was
music.
Nirvana and Pearl Jam and yeah.
Well, I always am interested in that particular era too. There's a band that I think specifically in Southern California, or a few bands that are really Southern California heavy. Jane's Addiction was sort of that
Yeah.
precursor, and that sort of bled over. Were you a fan of theirs, or had you gone to
Oh,
see
for
them live? It
big
was huge,
time.
right? Yeah, yeah. And
Big, yeah. I mean, it was,
yeah.
yeah, big time.
I didn't realize that wasn't the world. I grew up in Southern California. I had older brothers who graduated high school in 1988. So I was kind of always the little brother. And I heard all this music they were listening to, Red Hot Chili
Yeah.
Peppers, Jane's Addiction. Um, and then, but it was huge. It's just like, I thought Jane's Addiction was like the Beatles, and then people were like, no,
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
didn't really cross over. The same with Oingo Boingo, but that's a generation before that even. But
Yeah.
they were just huge in LA.
No, and I think that there were, you know, I think to the world, once it all became huge, it looks one way. But I think if you were from LA and, you know, remember there was like Bam
Oh
magazine, you
yeah.
know,
Yeah, of
and so I
course.
started
Yeah.
looking when I was right, and you would so it would have all these ads of all the local bands that were playing clubs. And, you know, bands like Guns N' Roses weren't so far removed from Jane's Addiction and things like that. I think that they were, you know, they were like part of this kind of sleazier subset of
The Sunset
Hollywood.
Strip, and yeah, but
Yeah,
one night,
Melrose,
yeah.
you know, like the Melrose bands that were different than like the Hollywood bands, you
That's
know,
so
and
funny.
yeah, but I think because that's the thing is bands like the Red Hot Chili Peppers hard to imagine now, but back then were really part of this kind of emerging alternative music scene with Jane's Addiction and whatnot. Yeah,
Hmm. Yeah,
yeah.
I have all the flyers that my older brother collected, and he skateboarded
Oh,
and
that's
he
so
played
cool.
guitar and stuff, and he loved the Muffs, he loved Mary's Danish,
Yeah.
Fishbone. It was this kind of world of stuff. I think he kind of was a part of that '80s Paisley Underground mod, sort of revival
Oh
that
yeah,
hit
the
hard
three
back before.
o'clock is one of my. I love,
Uh
you
huh.
know, it's one of my favorites. I love all that stuff. In fact, there was another band from that very obscure band called Lions and Ghosts. Do you
Ooh, I don't
remember?
know them. No,
They
don't
were,
know
and they
them.
were actually signed to me, but they were kind of late period Paisley Underground. And yeah, there's a guy in the band, this name Rick Parker,
Hmm.
and he actually became like a fairly big producer. And he produced records by, I think he did Dandy Warhols and Black
That
Rebel
makes
Motorcycle
sense,
Club
right? Yeah,
and
I
kind of
could see
that
the
era.
evolution of
But
that. Yeah.
he came from that, and yeah, I've become friendly with him over the years.
Did
Yeah,
you
but
did
yeah.
did you ever see Moonwash Symphony? Where they were kind of a
Oh, I
psychedelic band
remember.
with like
Yeah. Oh,
Sean
yeah.
Sullivan that was in that
Sean,
era.
Sean.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know, it's so funny because I went to community college in
Okay.
the right after high school and Sean was like in my like music reading class. You
Oh,
know,
how
we were all just
funny.
like these misfit Orange County musicians. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I
Yeah, yeah.
remember. Oh, yeah, for sure.
And then he fell in with Elliott Smith and became the Golden Boy and kind of had his own
Yeah.
sort of post Moonwash. It's so funny. I ran into him years later. His daughter goes to the same preschool as one of my friends, and we bumped
Oh,
into each
yeah.
other, and it was so funny. I was like, oh my gosh! But then I came to find out he had a whole other career. I probably hadn't seen him since '93 or so. That was the last time I saw him,
Oh,
and then he
crazy.
caught me
Yeah,
up on everything
yeah.
else that happened in his life. He became a big part of that world, Silver Lake and
Oh,
Elliott Smith.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
It was wild. Oh, how funny! What a small world. Yeah, I remember seeing
Yeah.
Moonwash Symphony at I guess it would have been Tower Records right there by the Brea Mall. They did it
Oh
in the
yeah, it's
store. It
across the
was so
street.
yep,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
That was
yeah.
yeah. I spent a lot of time in that record store.
Yeah, me
Um,
too. Me too. That one and the one in Anaheim on Beach Boulevard, which was
okay,
really big.
it's crazy.
Yeah,
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 yeah. I would go the other way towards West Covina. That's where they had like a video store in that one at the mall. They're right off the
yeah,
10, and so you could like rent videos. I remember renting like Twin Peaks when it was first there, like the VHS box tape, and then like Jim Jarmusch, film Night on Earth and stuff. It was like, whoa, this is like
yeah,
kind of just that suburban sort of connection to any kind of underground larger art thing that was happening in the 90s. It was so hard.
yeah.
It's not like it is today.
No, Tower Records were so great, and I think I mean I hate. I mean I'm just that guy like talking about what it used to be like. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I really don't want to be like that, but it was so cool because I was a bit of a I was not I wouldn't say I was like a loner like I tried to be, but I just was. I lived
It
a
happens.
very solitary life. I just like to play the guitar, and so I had a job. I would after work because Tower Records is always open until midnight. So I would get off my job on Friday night and have my paycheck, and I'd have 3 hours to go to Tower Records, and I would just flip through the records because that's how you would find out, like, oh, Pink Floyd has all these records, or blah blah whatever you get
Hmm.
into. You just go by flipping through the bins, and so you have like those weird days. You're like, I'm gonna go in the classical room and be like, I don't know anything in this fucking place. You know what I mean? But you
Yeah.
start looking and like, what is all this stuff? It was fun.
Oh yeah, Rhino Records was great too out in Claremont. That was super close to me out that
Yeah.
way. And I remember, yeah, just going through the 7-inch section because it was affordable. Usually like around $5 or less, and so I could just take chances on like this looks cool. I don't know what this Loot Fisk band is, but there's a new 7-inch. Okay, like new things from like local bands and just try to discover things.
Yeah, I have a pretty big record collection still. I'm sure you do too.
Yeah,
You know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah.
And I've kept everything, unfortunately,
Of
which is
course.
a hassle. And so I remember. Did you ever go to that? It's probably far for you, but Huntington Beach, there was a Vinyl
Oh
Solution.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It was a
Yeah,
rare, a
and so
rarity to get down there. Yeah, but definitely I remember that
yeah,
place. Yeah.
so I had in high school. So even I started going there in high school, and so I have all those and I look at the 7 inches, and it would be like Nirvana 7 inches, Smashing Pumpkins seven, the Sub Pop
Oh
7 inch
yeah,
that they put out, and things like 349 two.
yeah.
I mean, it
Totally.
was so cheap, so
Those
cheap,
have to have
yeah.
gone up in value, right? At least worth
Oh
more.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Mud
No
Honey,
doubt.
like I was buying
Oh
like
yeah,
all the Mud Honey stuff, and yeah, yeah, yeah,
that's wild. So yeah,
yeah.
so tell me, how did Smashing Pumpkins happen? What happens in that
um,
situation?
Straight. So I bummed around the music industry, in LA. I was lucky that when I was 18, I joined a band, and the guys were a little bit older than me. They're
Mhm.
like 26, 27, which at the time seemed like, wow, they're so much older than me. And so I started playing, and there was no Silver Lake scene or much really. So it was still very Hollywood centric. So I was very lucky that I got to play all those clubs, and then I started another band. It was like a shoegaze noise pop band called the Lassie Foundation, and we played a bunch around LA, and that was kind of more Silver Lake kind of times,
Was it
late 90s,
Jabberjaw?
early
Did you ever?
2000s. Yeah.
Would you play Jabberjaw
Well,
in that kind of
it's
world?
funny
Or that
because
was.
we never played there, but that was definitely a place that was open, and
Okay.
and I actually live right near there now,
Oh,
where the
funny.
old like
Yeah.
really really close to there. It's so funny. I'm like, that's where it was. Yeah, because I talk about that all the time with some of our old friends, like
Oh yeah.
Jabber Josh, it's just right here. Um, but I basically kind of given up on music at some point. Said, okay, like this, I gotta get I got to get my shit together. So after I graduated my undergrad, I went to Cal State Long Beach and got a degree in comparative literature, and I was so into it that actually I I got into a PhD program at UCLA, so I was getting my doctorate at UCLA in comparative literature. And somewhere 4 or 5 years into doing that, I got a text one day from one of my buddies who's like, "Hey, I have a friend. She works at Smashing Pumpkins management company. They're getting back together. They're reforming, and James and Darcy aren't coming back, so they're looking for a guitar player and bass player. And I think you'd be perfect for it." And I was not a professional musician. I never like I didn't have like a bio and a photo and like all these things
Yeah.
like to audition for a band, because people, no offense to it, but people go to music school and then they move to LA and be like, "Hey, I want to get in a band.
Yeah.
I'm going to play for like Post Malone or something, right? You know what I mean? They
Sure.
want to do something, you know what I mean? And so they come and they audition, but which is great. But I was not that kind of musician. I was like, especially by that point, I was like, I was like into like noise bands and shoegaze bands, and I wasn't into being like, a pro.
You wasn't trying to be a hired gun. Yeah. Yeah.
No, 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 no. But I did, the Smashing Pumpkins, they were a band that at the time, when I was young, I really liked, because I think and the reason I kind of belabored that story about what I learned when I first started taking guitar lessons was because I think what ultimately became this style was, I think if you were born of that era, like I understood kind of the aesthetics of what the band was. So I really liked Billy's playing and songwriting, and obviously Jimmy's drumming and all that kind of stuff. It was really cool, and I felt like I understood what it was trying to do, musically and especially as a guitar player. So I was like, oh, that could be kind of interesting. And so I wrote a bio and whatever, found a picture of myself, and I'm not, and I kind of knew because I was a fan of the band. So I'm like, compared to most of these Hollywood people, they're gonna try to find, I just knew to put like, I put a little bio and I put like guitar influences, and I know Billy's gonna love this shit. You know what I mean? So
You knew
I
enough
put
about
like,
the band to know.
I knew the guitar that he would like, like you can't say I don't know, Jerry Cantrell and
Yeah.
and Mike McCready and these guys from
Right.
his contemporaries, because he would be like, well, nobody's
Sure. Yeah,
they
they don't like
they.
their friends.
So I was like, oh, my influence are like Richie Blackmore, um, My Bloody Valentine, and things like. I don't even know if I said My Bloody. I know I said Brad Lehner from this band Medicine,
Of course. Yeah.
which I knew toured with the Pumpkins very early on, and so they got a little more. And I got a call like the next day. I get that like so they called me and they're like, "Hey, do you want to come meet the guys, and have lunch?" And so literally within a few days, I was like, "Fuck!" Like I was having lunch with Billy and Jimmy somewhere in the valley, and it wasn't like an audition, like, "Hey, come on Saturday, blah 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 blah, and
Yeah.
we're gonna have all these." It was like, "Hey, let's get together and jam." And it just went on for months because they were out here working on a record. And so we'd get together, play, and they were so cool. Like they would be like, "Hey, let's go jam," and then afterwards, come hang out with us at the studio. So I got to see like how they got to make a record, and I never really spent that much time in like these real studios where they have runners getting you whatever you want, coffee, meal. What do you want to eat? You
Sure.
get all these menus. You know what I mean? They send someone out just food arrives. You know what I mean?
And
All
it's just
this.
the two of them working on the record. It's just Billy
It
and
was,
Jimmy. Okay.
and yeah, and it's so crazy because it was the Zeitgeist record, and towards the end of that record, maybe the last third, they brought in Roy Thomas Baker, the producer who did like
Wow.
Queen and the Cars, and I mean, and he was just such a crazy character. You know what I mean? So yeah, it was just cool. I got to be a fly on the wall and hang out, and then eventually, they tried me out and some other people, and then it's right because I was the first guitar player I think they tried out, and I think that they're like, wow, this is cool. This is sounds good, like and I mean I did okay. I mean I did yeah, I mean I did good enough, and but I think they thought like, well, it can't be this easy. Like we have to go through the motions and try out a bunch of people, and they even flew people in from Chicago and stuff. I remember, like I said, it went over for months, but but finally they're like, okay, I got the gig, and and then so started that crazy part of my life.
That's wild. And was it something? Was it something as you were doing it more and more that you realized like, oh, this was cooler than I thought, or in terms of what your expectations were, going into it? And I guess now in hindsight, right? I mean, now everything's a lot clearer, I'm sure. But from what you thought it was going to be
Yeah.
to when you first got like the thumbs up, was this like, oh, cool, I'm stoked?
Yeah, I mean, I had no idea what I was, especially I mean, no, I should pinpoint. I had no idea what I was getting myself into,
Okay, there'd be no way of knowing what you don't even know what you didn't know. I suppose at that point,
exactly. Like you
yeah,
would think, like, oh, I should have gone and gotten some advice or ask, but like you said, I think, see, like
yeah.
you don't even know what to ask.
Right. Yeah.
You don't even. It was just
you've never
so.
been given per diem in your life. You've worked regular jobs. You've gone to school. You've lived a normal life. You drive a car. You didn't know that.
I mean, that was like, I
Sleeping
had
in a
been on tour.
bus, or that kind of thing.
Yeah, well, staying at, I mean, at these fancy hotels where there's like bellmen and all this, I mean,
Yeah.
it was but I mean, even so, that cultural lifestyle stuff was like shocking and not prepared for it, and like nothing I'd ever experienced. But then also, just say, even just from a more musical level, like having a guitar tech
Oh, I
and
can't
someone
imagine.
building you a guitar rig and changing you. I remember I brought so when I went to rehearsal, the first rehearsals, okay, I only owned, I maybe had, but I only had two guitars to take. I had my this red Jazz Master and a Telecaster, and so I took in the, you know, and then the guitar tech. This guy is sweet man. He goes, hands me back the guitar. He like changed the strings and set it up. He goes, this was the most disgusting guitar I've ever seen in my life. And he showed me like this, like kind of rag that he used to clean off the fretboard. And
Sure.
it was just, just because, I never thought, oh, I should clean the fretboard.
Yeah. Well, it's a guitar you
Yeah.
live with. Like most people, like 99% of people that own guitars just have them sitting in
Yeah.
their living room or in their bedroom. Maybe has a case where he does it, but just lives. Yeah. You're just living
Yeah.
your life with this
So,
guitar.
yeah.
That's
So
hilarious.
even things, like
Yeah.
that. And so I walked the first day of rehearsal. There was just Les Pauls and SGs and, you know, Marshall 412 cabinets and all these different heads. And they're like, okay, these four heads are for you. And like, it was crazy. And so imagine you've never played, I never could afford a Les Paul. So you're just like, okay, you go to start playing and you're playing through an amp, even if it's a great amp, like super expensive diesel amp or Bogner amp. You've never played through anything like that with the guitar. You've never played. You're not going to sound good, even if it's great equipment, because you
Sure.
just don't even know how to control it. So it was
Yeah.
just the first couple of days were just it was hilarious. Like, I mean, I think I almost got fired, because it was so bad. I mean,
Oh, that's
and I was just like,
hilarious.
just give me a couple of days to get my, and to my own credit, I put in the work and I started showing up. Like if rehearsal say was from like 2 to 8, I was showing up at 10 a.m., 9 a.m. and working by myself for hours,
Right. That
and
makes sense.
then,
Well, again, just dialing it in and kind
yeah,
of knowing what happens. What's the response of the amp from the guitar? How
yeah,
much can I bend the string? Is it going to just turn to mud? Is it going to bottom out here? Or like, is it going to start feeding back? Yeah.
yeah,
That's great. And then
and
was there,
just trying to learn all this tunes.
sure. Yeah. That's what I was going to ask you. Was there a directive to like, were you playing James's parts or was it sort of a hybrid? Did Billy kind of rewrite the parts or did he split them up? Or what was the sort
No,
of
no, I mean,
directive for that?
well, because it was a different world back then. And so a big focus was the new album,
I
which,
see.
so James didn't play on the new
Okay.
album. It was Billy played all the good. So it was just like trying to just, okay, you play this, and then the old stuff. Yeah, I would basically play whatever James played live. Billy
Okay.
was like, I'm just going to do what I always did on these older tunes. So just, it's kind of obvious, if he's
Mhm.
singing, like you're going to play anything melodic, you know what I
Sure.
mean? Or things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
The
yeah,
lead
yeah.
lines.
Yeah. So once like I kind of got comfortable with the gear, like it kind of fell into place because, like I said, I think like stylistically, it was in my wheelhouse. Although I never really played that heavy, you know what I mean? Because especially by that's a there was some really heavy stuff in like the Zeitgeist. There was a lot of really down tuned, like we tuned the whole guitar down to C sharp, and
Whoa. Yeah.
is really low and heavy, and yeah. So I never played stuff like quite that heavy outside of my bedroom.
Sure. Well, that's a whole other world. I mean,
Yeah.
keeping intonation right with that. I mean, you would definitely need a guitar tech to keep those down tuned
Yeah.
guitars. Like, it's from just turning
Oh, yeah.
sour. The heavier gauge strings. That's wild. And so the experience, it must have been great. So, are you on tour right away from that? I mean, just.
Oh
it's a
yeah, so
whirlwind. Yes.
that first I remember it was April 2007, and I think our first show was like the first show I played with was like the last week of May.
Wow, wild.
Yeah,
there was
every so often some like a pump will post like this day in Pumpkin's history was the first show of the like, and I'm like, wow, like just such a lifetime ago.
I remember hearing a story that Billy brought in his own PA to Spaceland. Was that part of a Pumpkins thing, or was that something different?
No, that may have been well, it wasn't like his own PA, but like
sure. A higher like one out.
Yeah, I'm sure. I think Zwan played there.
Okay. Those are those things you hear when you're with our crusty bands. We'd be going somewhere like, yeah, Smashing Pumpkins played here, and they brought their own PA. And now looking back on it, it's like, well, it's not that big of a lift.
Well, all at bands, the time, when all arena. I mean, when you're when you tour, even if you're playing like, a lot of bands, even if you're. Yeah, that they'll bring your own PA. You know what I mean? Yeah.
It's just so beyond. You know what I mean? It just exploded the mind. Like what?
I know.
I have a Toyota Camry. I just feel whatever they.
I know it. It seems so indulgent, and and in a certain way, it is. You know what I mean? It is, but it's no. I think that's and it's and it's funny because. I'm trying to, the best way to put these things is, I, for all sense and purpose, had come from indie rock, and then all of a sudden you're thrown into like a situation where we're like, well, this is a pro situation. And
at the highest level of pro, yeah,
whatever for all the good and bad. And so things like, we want it to sound good, and this PA isn't powerful and isn't even powerful enough to deal with like the level of stage volume that we have here. That's the crazy, things like that. Like, I mean, you probably actually played pretty crazy loud, with no age. Like,
yeah. And I was told to turn.
You had a lot of amps, and I grew up in an era where I had a half stack too. I mean, now in the age of where everybody only uses combo amps, but I mean,
a full stack is great. A full stack.
But even with that, like I never had experienced anything so bone crunching loud on stage. And they always said by the time I joined the band that it wasn't even loud anymore, but it was, you're running like, 2 half stacks and it's loud, you know what I mean? Yeah. And I always wore earplugs, and then we obviously moved to in-ears once that technology became the norm. But just if you'd pull them out for a second, be like, oh my God, like it is like, because you have like side fills, and it was just.
But I imagine a drummer like Jimmy is hitting hard as well. I mean, that's sort of where a lot of it comes from. Is at least in those early days, you try to get
even back by then,
the cymbals are the cymbal and snare. It's just the big drummer like that. He's just gonna hit loud.
It just powerful, just intense. Yeah, so it was like that kind of stuff is just. That stuff was fun, to learn. Like, wow, you have. I mean, there's just so many funny things. Like you said, like what do you even like when you just laugh? Like, and this is like things you would never think of. But when you're in like a pro situation, like you realize like this stage dimensions, like from like say where the drum set up to the microphone to where the 2 other mics and your pedal board to the back line.
Yeah,
they measure that out every single, and it's exactly the same every day.
That's insane, right? Yeah.
It's not like, hey, I'm just I'm gonna put my amp over here, and I like, you know what I mean, like, I see bands like new bands, and like, wait, like you're set up on this side of the stage on this show, and now you're on this side, you know what I mean? Where like there's nothing like that.
Right.
Everything is
Down to the
totally
inch.
calculate.
It's
Yeah, yeah,
There's
yeah,
someone's
yeah,
job.
yeah.
There's someone's job to measure out where everything goes every day.
Absolutely.
They're there before
Yeah,
the band gets there.
absolutely.
And what
Yeah.
I mean, did you lose your mind a little bit? I would have to imagine there must be a process of just kind of like, well, I guess, I can do whatever I want to do. Now I'm in the Smashing Pumpkins. Like how did that work?
Well, no, I think the first couple years I didn't really enjoy the it's because I was just nervous. So it was just, I was used to playing like 35 minutes, 40
Oh
minutes,
God.
and then all of a sudden, we were playing like 3 hour shows, 2 hour, 2.5 hours.
That's
And
just grueling on your back and your feet.
yeah, and I
Those
think my
long,
second or third show with the band was at Rock am Ring or we Rock am Ring, Rock am Park in Germany, and there was like 70,000 people. So just like it was
it's
hard to
absurd.
just
It's
die
surreal. You
to,
can't
to
even
die
imagine.
to die just so I didn't enjoy it because I was just honestly trying not to fuck up. You know what I mean? Just trying to get through without making a mistake, and get through the sets and remember and just be comfortable with the whole experience and being on stage. So those first couple years were just trying to hold it together. Yeah. And so
Yeah.
I don't have a lot of detailed memories of like shows so much because I was just so focused on trying to play good enough, you know. And then but once I started feeling comfortable, and and I worked really hard at like, okay, I'm going to practice all the time, and not just practice the set, but practice, get better at guitar and take lessons and do all these things, because I was like, wow, I'm so fucking lucky. I'm actually getting paid to play I pay all my bills by being a musician. I don't have to do anything else other than be a musician, and what goes along with it. So I just really took it as an opportunity to get better. And so I certainly, the guitar player I left as, in 2023 was not the guitar player I walked in as. I
Of
certainly
course.
improved and got a lot better but I worked at it. I
No,
worked at it.
yeah. Well, it makes
Yeah.
sense. I mean, there's a certain kind of just 10,000 hours of just, you're just going to
Yeah.
get better at playing no matter what, just that much stage time. But
Yeah.
also, yeah, putting that into that dedication is huge. I remember early days of no age stuff. Like when, again, we kind of were starting to be able to pay the bills a little bit, but also there's songs I wanted to write. There was records I wanted to make and I wasn't
Yeah.
good. I would always do this. Like I tried every record we would write. I would try to write above my level, like as in the practice space, I'd be like, oh, this is just hard. This is just hard enough. I can't actually play it well right now, but that's just this is day one. I just wrote the riff or I just wrote the solo, or I just wrote this chord progression and I can't quite stretch it out. It's hard, but I was like, that's
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
That's a good place to be. I want to be there all the time. And so
Absolutely.
then I would
Yeah.
write to that. I'd write just beyond my skill level. And then by the time we'd go in to make the record, I'd be pretty much having, by the end of the tour, it was nothing. I could do it like I'd been doing it, I could do it in my sleep. And not because
Isn't
I
that
was good,
amazing?
but it's just the time. I just had the time to
Yeah.
obsess
Yeah.
on it and play it. Yeah, it's great. It's an incredible thing to be able to learn, especially in those, not as a teenager. I think I spent most of my learning years, on a skateboard trying to learn to kick flip. It was the only time I
Yeah.
really progressed and learned something I was proud of myself for. And then like, oh wait, I could finger pick. I wanted to learn how to finger pick and play, like bluegrass stuff or folk things. And I remember being in a van in England, just like listening to, songs like, okay, that's the chord, but what is the pattern on that? And then just being really bad for about 6 months. I spent a whole tour just playing, but in between sound check and showtime, I would just be finger picking really badly at first. And then
Yeah.
slowly by the end of the tour, again, cause I had nothing but time, what else was I going to do? Just drink beers and, watch a movie or something, or, play
Yeah.
video games. I was like, no, I'd rather be playing the guitar. This is what I'm here to do. And so I got okay at finger picking, but I just had to like burn it out in my fingers.
Yeah, yeah. It's
There's a
such
lot
a.
of downtime on tour.
Who are you? What kind of guys were, or what players were you
Well,
into?
John
To
Fahey was what I was going for. I
yeah,
mean, that was
yeah.
the
I love
thing.
huge. Yeah,
I never got there, and but that was the Northern Star. But he's also like Elizabeth Cotten, which I'd come
yeah,
find out
yeah.
hers was backwards and left-handed backwards, upside down, and
Ah, so
she had a
you
whole
were
other
just trying
thing.
to figure it
I was
out.
just doing it. Yeah, I was just listening to it and it's like, okay, how was
Yeah.
the kind of the thumb pattern stuff. And I never,
Oh,
again, just getting a little bit of a three finger sort of rolling, picking thing, and
yeah.
some Nick Drake stuff. But again, he's got different tunings. It's like I was kind of just feeling around in the dark. Like, well, it doesn't sound exactly like that, but I wanted something like that, something in there.
Yeah, yeah. But that's kind of the fun part, especially when you're trying to figure it out on your own, is I think as far as developing your own style and how it translates into like say like Euro music is by almost by learning things wrong, you
Oh yeah,
learn your own way to do it, right?
of
Kind of your
course.
own take on it. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. And I think
yeah.
that's kind of an important part of like learning things wrong because because then you make it your own.
Right. Yeah. No, it's
Yeah.
the only way. Yeah. I feel very confident in
Yeah.
in whatever style I've developed in that, like, even if I'm trying to cover something, it's going to come out through the filter of whatever I play and not
Yeah.
necessarily like it's a conscious decision. It's half not being very good and half just, trying my best. And it sort of comes out in a way like, I'm going to go ahead and call that my style.
I don't
But
know, but to me that it's weird because I have these kind of sometimes conflicting and contradictory impulses
mhm.
because I grew up, I took lessons. I had someone going, okay, this is a key, this is a chord, this is how you can take the major scale and then you harmonize it and it's a chord scale and then these are all the modes that go within this key. And so I knew how to put basic harmony and together and what scales and arpeggios would go over what kind of
Oh,
chord progressions. I had that
wow.
kind of basic knowledge, but
It's huge.
then yeah, but then when I got into say bands like Sonic Youth or something, and I think they're just as systematic, but just in their own idiosyncratic way. And I really respect that. In fact, I maybe respect it more than ever that they created their own language, their own voice, their own way of approaching the instrument. And that's really the key to anything musical. If you want to do your own music, is honest. It's just finding your own voice and your own way to do things. And whether that means having a lot of technique and a lot of knowledge or having none, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It doesn't really matter as long as you arrive at the destination you want to arrive to. Now, you may reach a point where you're sitting there and I certainly have this where like I hear like I hear music and I don't know how they achieve those effects.
Mhm.
And no matter how good you think you can play by ear, there are certain kind of chord progressions and harmonic things that you're just not going to arrive at intuitively. I mean, maybe
Yeah.
there's some people that are really genius, but that just have like, but not me. There's certain things I'm like, okay, I got to learn how you can overlay that chord over that to create this. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
so I'll go
Absolutely.
research it and find it, or I'm actually still taking guitar lessons. I've been studying classical guitar for like the last 8 months.
Oh, that's incredible. That's great though, right?
Yeah,
I mean, because there's still always that's the thing too. Whenever I
yeah,
learn more things, it just really teaches me how much I don't know. I think I
yeah,
walked around pretty confident in my four chords that I knew in my 20s, and then once I learned that fifth chord, I'm like, oh fuck, there's more chords. Wait, now then it's like it opens up every new thing I would learn would just open up the path, gets longer and
yeah,
darker. Like, oh, I don't know how that goes over there, but there's a curiosity to it, to the point now where I'm so happy and always, yeah, I've wanted to take lessons for years. I've done a few like online courses and I watch a lot of
yeah,
videos and I love just a riff or just a thing because I'm still at that point. I feel like I like to write from that. I'll get inspired.
yeah,
Someone
yeah,
will say like, oh, this is this lesson within like 2 minutes. I'm like, okay, I pause that and I'm over here writing a song or writing something else different on
yeah.
piano or something. And then that just happened to me. A friend sent me me a lesson he was working on, and I got inspired, and I sent him the song I wrote. And he's like, "That's great." He's like, "That's not in C minor at all. Like the lesson was in C minor. You resolved to E flat for some reason. It sounds fine. It sounds good, but like your first chord is a C minor, and the rest of the key was never a C minor key." I was like, okay.
You're like, sorry, dude.
Sorry, if I wrote a song. Thanks for letting me know. It was inspiring enough. I don't know if I got the lesson, but I got a song out of it. So that's time worth it. It's time well spent.
Yeah. So Randy, the other day when we played together during your set, now were you improvising most of the?
All of it.
Do you improv?
Yeah. I have a few areas. I have a few areas I can kind of like go with. You know what I mean? A few probably.
Yeah, of course.
Almost handicapped into a few keys that I just really enjoy playing in. But yeah, no, it's all improvised. I would like to. But the similar kind of way I've done these 2 solo records, which I think were similar to what you and William are doing, where I just kind of recorded a lot of stuff and then I would take edit time. So I think I did like 2 weeks of recording and then maybe 2 months of editing to really kind of refine the pieces. And then if I liked something but needed more movement or modality, then I would add to it. I didn't keep it necessarily as something I could only play live. So the records are usually layered at least, 2 or 3 times.
Oh, so you would add overdub over.
Yeah. So I never really kept to this idea that the record had to be something that I could then perform again live. Kind of was more
that's cool.
The soundtrack sort of idea of something. Because those 2 records also I worked with a photographer friend and filmmaker who actually do a wrap up. I do every other show for Aaron Farley on these podcasts. We've been friends for a long time, but we made these 2 kind of art pieces of visual art that went with each record. And I did some installation shows with them. And so it was a whole kind of conceptual idea that made those records sort of a puzzle box for me to sort of play with. The record itself was almost like a symptom of a larger piece. It was like that.
Yeah.
Like, oh, well, that's over there on the side. That's what happened over this larger theme that I was working on. So I never really made it as a record that would stand on its own, but I think it does in some cases. But as a soundtrack to an art installation.
How important is the gear you're using to that stuff? Are just in general, or even for the creation of it? So are you? I think because like for me in doing that type of stuff, I feel like it's really I need specific things. And so
I think I've kind of come to, especially in the like, I think I went sort of wide with effects, and I've really gotten good at kind of downsizing to get everything into a Pelican so I can tour with it as a carry-on. So I always have a volume pedal and 2 delays. And then I could probably get away with that, for an hour long set. I have also bought a kitchen timer, like a small little like timer that goes with the thing, because it literally becomes my literal timekeeper, but in a way that I play off of this thing because I'll get lost. I've done it enough now, solo work, where I don't know if it's 3 minutes or if it's 12 minutes. So or 30 seconds. Sometimes I think I've been playing so long and I'm like nervous. And I look down, it's like, oh, but you've only been playing for a minute, buddy. Hang in there, slow it down. so I literally need a representation of time to sort of help me space out the piece and my performance. So, so then I use these Digitech Jam Man loopers so I can kind of loop and layer in that too. And then I have on this board right now, a Philosopher's Tone. The Pigtronics kind of it's a compressor and fuzz kind of dirt thing. So that's really it, and that kind of helps just get bigger and sustainy for stuff. But
the kitchen timer is the most important thing. I know. I bought one for our gig because I'm like, well, we need to have a countdown clock, a kitchen, like a LED, big red. You know what I mean? Because you have no way of knowing. Like I in 2021, which is my record, Metanoia, is basically a cold sort of live performances. Not that you would know because I I was playing DI, and so they recorded everything at the desk. You know what I mean?
Cool.
So, but you don't hear any like outdoor ambience or anything. But it was a big outdoor art installation in Toronto,
Oh,
and I
cool.
had to play for over the weekend. I did like 7 45-minute performances just by myself, and
Whoa. Yeah.
and I asked them. I said, I need a clock because, and I would close my. You start playing, and you're like, oh my god, I must have been playing for 30 minutes. Right. And then you
Yep.
look, you're like, oh my God, only 10 minutes has gone by. I have another 35 minutes and I'm already used
I've
all my
played everything.
tricks.
I got nothing
Yeah,
else in
I
me. Yeah.
know. What if I get that? But I think that uncomfortable space is the beauty of doing improvised music, and that
Yeah.
you have to make it. You have to go on the journey and see where it's going to go, and it forces you to come up with things that you just can't come up with in your conscious mind. Like you can't map it out and go on a piece. Okay, I'm going to do this, this, and this, and this, and it's going to work out like this. Because I feel like 9 times out of 10, you do the first two things that you've kind of put in your head, and you're like, "Fuck, that didn't work." And so now I'm somewhere. I'm totally lost. Where am I? And so you have to. Yeah. So I try to do less and less of that, where I try to go, okay, let me just be in the moment and see where it goes. The interesting thing with the stuff that William and I are doing, I feel like our score, like if we had like a musical score, it's really the settings. We use very specific settings on the
Mm-hmm.
equipment. Like
Yeah.
this piece that we're gonna do, the delay is set like this. Like we have it all written down and mapped out. Like everything is very specific. So
Yep.
that's like our system.
I see.
And so then we walk into the system, and then we'll choose a key because
Mm-hmm.
you got it, because
Sure.
especially with two people,
Yeah.
with the delays, like you can't, because if someone plays one note that's out of key, it's horrible. I mean,
Sure.
there's no going back. You know
No.
what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Especially once you add that to a long delay piece, you're just like, oh,
yeah, yeah. So
it's
we
gonna live
have
there
that,
for a while. Yeah.
but then other than that, we just try to see what happens within that system. How many different types of ideas and musical textures can this kind of system produce,
I love it. That's
and
great. Yeah. It's
yeah.
and that way it's true to the name, like experimental music, in that like
Yes.
there is a set of knowns or fixed values, and then there's the variables, and you're basically you're what you put into the fixed value environment is your
Yes.
variable, and each one of you has a variable that you will then play off of each other, and that becomes its own sort of like, you know what will happen. I've done that for years too. Just like, what would this sound like if I ran this chain, or this chain of effects? Like, I want to see this and
Yeah.
this, and then, it's not always musical, but it's interesting. It's you know what I mean. There could be something kind of fruitful from that. I love seeing an
For
effects
sure.
chain. Like, at some point in my life, I think of the just the setting up and this of a signal path becomes its own sort of piece of art in its own way too. I've developed a few strategies with No Age, in that being one guitar and then one drummer, and I've tried to cover a high, mid, low with a lead channel. So I have a 4-channel setup I run live for No Age, and then with a mono DI and a stereo DI. So it's really, it's really 7 channels of sound that come out from me to the board every night. And so I kind of
Wow.
keep those like, um, each for, have their own sound and tone and, information that they run.
And how do you switch all of it?
So it can all happen simultaneous is the idea, is that, so the high, mid, lows will be,
Yeah, but I'm saying,
tones, and then
do you use like I have, through the years, I've had like
ABY boxes,
mid,
things like that,
like
or
no, a MIDI switcher where, like,
oh
we have like like I have one now. It's by RJM. It has like
yeah.
10 loops. You put a pedal or whatever in each loop, and then you can make presets. Like, okay,
Mhm.
these things are on, and it has MIDI. So a lot of these new pedals have MIDI, so you can,
Right.
with one button you can switch all this stuff. I'm saying, do
No,
you just do it old
I've
school?
never gone down that road. Mostly all the pedals are set to where they're going to be. The delay will sometimes I'll switch between like a reverse and then like a
Yeah.
tapped thing.
Uh-huh.
But no, everything's kind of set. The idea is I'm sort of, it's more like I'm splitting signals and then
Yeah.
running separately and then maybe combining them back. So that's sort of, and so then I'm just kind of turning on and off. I have like a separate solo channel that I'll just turn on through a big like tube screamer thing that comes right off of the tuner pedal. So it's like just directly into like from the guitar tuner into a tube screamer to its own amp that only turns on when I
Uh-huh.
want to solo over everything else, because then those things can all be looped. And then I have like kind of a rhythm channel that I can loop and then split that between a high chimey, sort of clean chime amp, and
Yeah.
then a dirty mid, like big
Oh
tube amp for
man.
the mids, and then a octave down. Then I split that also down to an octave down for kind of a subby tubby kind of mud sort of channel. And
Wow, I
then
got to come see this.
anyway, yeah.
Wow, that's
Yeah, it's right.
intense.
But and then like I say, then there's like the stereo samples too that run out. Like I have a board that just goes straight to the PA, and then same with Dino, he'll have a sample running, stereo sample and and mono sample like right under his
So for a
drums.
two-piece band, you still have a lot of
I
inputs.
think we're like 16, 17 inputs. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
But that's what's always so funny, because then people will ask about like, oh, so you guys are like the White Stripes, or you guys are like the Black Keys, or this kind of thing. And I'm just like, it's not really there. I can see where guitar and drums and it sounds like that, but
Yeah.
we do very little stomping, bluesy, it's minimalism is not
Yeah.
necessarily what is happening here. You know what I mean? There's this,
Yeah, yeah,
they're just
yeah.
very different motors and different motivations, I think, between us and those kind of bands. Not that ones,
Sure.
obviously, they're rich and famous and they do great. They write they write big rock anthems, so that's not, we do something
Yeah.
kind of different. But anyway, but I'm always caught off guard. Yeah, well, we've hit the hour. This all went by so fast. There's so many more things I want to ask about, and
You can I got more
yeah.
time. So if you want to
Okay.
ask a few more, I'm more than happy. Yeah, yeah,
Well,
yeah.
I'm curious about the just before we go, I'm just curious about the collaboration or the collaborative effort that you were able to have within the Smashing
Uh-huh.
Pumpkins with your time there. Like, did that ever come up, or
Um,
what was that like as a player in this sort of band? Was it like you were more utility and not necessarily?
no, I think it morphed and changed and transferred into so many different things at different points depending on what was taking place. When
Mm,
I joined the band, it was Billy and Jimmy,
mm-hmm.
and they found me, and then Ginger Pooley, who was Ginger Reyes back then, and we were a four-piece band, and so they always the way that they explained it to us at the time was like, oh, we're not looking for hired musicians. We're looking for new members of the band,
That's
but
very generous of them.
I wouldn't say that's the
Oh,
way it worked. I
I
think,
see.
you know what I mean? I
They
think
say
it
it
was
in
like,
name only. Yeah.
I think because it was like they had to fill the space out too. You know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean? Like, well, what's that like having, because as you know, I mean, like you could play a gig with a different drummer, but going in that room and writing with a different drummer might be total,
Oh
it's
yeah.
going to be different, you know what I mean? And it may not be that chemistry that's no age, you know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean?
Oh
Or
no way.
same
Yeah.
thing. Yeah, yeah. So I think that they didn't want to hire professional musicians, which is that were like, hey, I'm playing with this band and now I got the Smashing Pumpkins gig, and now, and I'm going
Yeah.
to leave in 6 months to go back to whoever else I'm playing, what the next. So I think that's when they said, well, we want people, but then they didn't really want people to be like, you're never going to be, see, these are the things I never could have asked at the time. Like now I would know, like, well, what does it mean you want me to be in the band? Like, am I going to be in the band? Is it like after, you're going to get paid a salary for a certain amount of time, and then if in 5 years we feel really good, we could put you into like where you're earning off of like profit. I mean, I wouldn't even known to ask those
Sure.
questions. You know what I mean? I didn't understand how any of that. I just, when I was a kid, I read like, wow, fucking Jakey Lee just joined Ozzy Osbourne's band. He must be rich. You know what I mean? Then you read
Yeah.
like
Oh
Ozzy
God.
didn't pay him shit. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like,
Well, that
you know what
yeah.
I mean? But you're like, but he's
That
in
Aussie
fuck.
story is insane with the guitar players. I mean, that's a
Yeah,
whole.
yeah. And you're like, but now I understand all this. I mean, now I understand it completely how this happens, and all these kind of things. So I think that it was a weird situation, and that, like I said, they didn't want giggers, but they didn't really want someone that was going to be like, hey, you know what? I think you should go to an E minor there. You know what I mean?
That
And I
wasn't
get
very
that. And
loud.
I totally
Yeah.
get that because, you know what I mean? I
Mhm.
totally get that. And that's nothing wrong with that. You know
But
what I
in
mean? But
terms of your
like
own
I said,
parts and things you would add, like, hey, you're playing this, I'm kind of thinking this, with like in terms of what you were going to contribute to the
yeah, well,
song
I think
as
that
the new
once
song was being written.
yeah, I got comfortable with things, especially even live. Like what was great about the band is the band was always very interpretive. So if we're like, especially on a lot of like post melancholy records, like we would do like the songs off of like Adore or Machina were we would interpret them live. And Billy was always great about like kind of do what you want, within reason. You know what I
Sure,
mean? That
sure.
wasn't like, hey, I'm going to play
Stay in
this
the
reggae
song.
groove
No.
over, you know
Yeah,
what I
yeah.
mean? Play this
Yeah.
dub groove over, over this one. But, and, so it was a lot of fun. And then, at one point Jimmy left the band and then it was no original members except Billy. And so then that was very much more like it was a band in that way where like we were kind of, everybody was doing more of like what they would do because there was no reference point anymore that like, hey, like, we would play old tunes, but we were playing a lot of new tunes. You know what I mean? So, and then and I won't go through every era, but then by the time James rejoined the band and it was like, okay, we're playing these really massive big shows again, we kind of decided, well, we end up having to play things more like the record because that's what people are listening to these songs on Spotify. So it became very less interpretive, for the most part. And I think that it wasn't a bad thing to try and recreate the sound because we had three guitar players. We're like, let's really try to get that layered density and all those pretty beautiful tones and parts and use all the technology that's there to get it. But like for a long time we were doing this cover of Once in a Lifetime by the Talking Heads, like this really doom heavy version. And Billy would let me take like a really long, I would just totally shred metal, like long solo, you know what I mean? And he'd be like, go crazy, do all the things, let me do whatever I want. So I'm very, so in that way it was very, totally cool. You know what I mean?
That's
But it
cool.
was, like I said, I think when you're in a situation like that, it's not, I think that, even my own sense of not understanding like what you're getting into is you think like, wow, is it going to be like what you think you two's like or something like they're in the room jamming and
Mm.
everybody's like has to say, which maybe they're more like that, you know what I mean? Or maybe they're not, or who knows? You know what I mean? No, but the thing is you don't know unless you're in a room with a band. You don't know what the dynamic is like behind closed doors. What, regardless of how they present themselves to the public, every situation is different. And yeah, so things like that I had to learn like, well, what's going on here? What does this mean? Like, what does it mean to be a band member versus an employee? Or you know what I mean? And so those were kind of decisions when I accepted the job I didn't even think about.
Yeah.
And had I known going like, well, if you're joining something, and this is, no slight on the Smashing Pumpkins, you know what I mean? But if you're joining a band that's already established, you're Zach Wild or Jakey Lee, right? You're not going like, hey, you're getting 50% of the songwriting or 25% of the live show. It just, you know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah. I
But
heard this
if
great
no
interview
one's,
with Zach
yeah,
Wild where he said that if Mrs. O called, he would come over just to make a sandwich. There was never any money mentioned. He said he was basically an errand boy,
yeah,
and he was happy to do it. Anytime Mrs. O needed anything, that's who he worked for. He didn't work for Ozzy. He'd barely see Ozzy. You know what I mean? But he'd see
yeah,
Ozzy on
yeah.
stage, but mostly he worked for her. And he said, like, if she told me to go clean up the dog poop from the side of the yard, I went and clean up the dog poop. That was my job. I worked for her. Whatever she told me to do, I did.
Yeah,
Sometimes
yeah, yeah.
sometimes she would tell me to play guitar with her husband. Sometimes she would tell me to go sweep the floors. Whatever it was, that was the job. And he was happy to have it. And I
I
was like,
mean, good for
whoa.
him.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
wish I could be like that. That's not my, I
Yeah,
mean, that's
sure.
not my,
It's
you
extreme,
know,
yeah.
yeah, no, and I get it because he's thankful for everything that being an Aussie brought him. You know what I
Sure.
mean? And so I think that's his way of saying, like, you wouldn't even know who Zach Wild is if it wasn't for the Osbournes giving me that opportunity when he was like 18 years old.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh
Imagine,
yeah, yeah.
so that's, I totally get it. You know what I mean? I'm just saying that like
you
for
weren't
my
a
own.
kid, and it's a different situation. You were, yeah.
I just didn't even know. You know what I mean? I didn't even know. I didn't even think about it. You know what I mean? And for me, what it was about, what honestly more than the money or anything like that, is I enjoyed it the most because I just was learning so much. I mean, I was in a band with great musicians, you know,
Hmm.
and learning how to play better, sound better. I got to be, be in a studio watching people make real records and participate, at certain times too, and to see like, wow, this is how it's really done. And so that was just
That's
totally
cool.
worth it.
Did
And
you
I
get to
really loved,
would you play on the record or play in the
yeah,
studio?
I played on, starting on the a little bit before, but from the Oceania record up to the last, but yeah,
That's huge. That's
yeah.
huge. Wow.
Yeah, so and that record came out in what 2012, and then there was a few singles that were part of this other thing that, the Tear Garden project, that I played on a few things, even before that too. So yeah.
Were you must have been in the band when Deer Hunter opened. I know there was a number of dates.
Oh
I
yeah.
knew Bradford, and Bradford's a whole other, barrel of fish too. I imagine Bradford and Mr. Corrigan were, were two
Yeah,
immovable forces.
this is a controversial story,
Is
from
it?
what I hear, because from hearing from all my friends that revolve around that orbit. So
Well,
like,
I
well,
know.
so you
Yeah.
now, even from, I think, William, because
Oh,
future,
okay.
like
Yeah, yeah.
people heard versions of the story, and it's always interesting to hear their version of the story, that, because I was there, I saw every second of it. So
Okay.
I know what happened. I know what happened, and I know what didn't happen. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Well,
yeah,
I know
yeah.
just from touring with Bradford that he was probably the one of the most controlling, sort of personalities on tour, that within our small orbit of bands.
Sure.
I remember Bradford like being in the van yelling at Lockett to like put hand sanitizer on your hand, and like just being very, I was like, why you can't tell your band members to sanitize their hands? Like, I don't know what, but it's just, just bizarre behavior. And then so I just could imagine, that you take everything with a grain of salt. And then also Kristen being TM, I know the kind of mama bear Kristen was as a tour manager for
Oh
Deer
yeah,
Hunter.
yeah,
She was going to be
yeah,
protective,
yeah.
and I know she was in it too. So it was, yeah.
You know,
So
the thing is that I'll say about it is, they're a great band,
mm,
and and I was excited that they were playing. I was totally like, oh my god, because I loved those records at the time. And
sure, yeah.
they showed up. They were supposed to play two shows, and they showed up, and the first night was awesome. They were playing great, but what started it is, I think they went overtime.
Oh, okay. That's a no
And
no. Yeah.
and this gets back into our world of like indie rock versus pro rock. So you're an indie band, like, hey, if you're no age and Deer Hunter, you're touring, and like, hey, wow, they were supposed to get off at 9:30, and it's 9:35, and they're still up there finishing their last song. You're like, well, it's the last song, all good, right?
Yeah.
And when you're playing a quote unquote pro gig, when it's 9:30, there should be no music, not one sound coming out of your amps, or and you should be like getting off
Yeah.
stage. And so, um, now, so the problem did not start with, anybody in the band, and in fact, for better or for worse, I'm sure Billy Corgan had no idea who they were. In fact, he did have no idea who they were. He'd never heard of them. It was a thing that our booking agent at the time was like, "Hey, let's get these cool bands to open the as was a
Sure.
like it'll be a good for both, for them and for the Pumpkins to be." So I think that's, so it was like an industry thing, and that's what it was. And so, but I think, sadly, and where I think they were given the impression that the Smashing Pumpkins are Billy, which, he wants you to open these shows.
Mm.
And so, but that really wasn't the case, what I mean, like I said. And so, I think what happened is, so they went over time, and you had a roadie who was the stage manager,
Oh, okay.
act, out of line and aggressive, and say some not nice things to Bradford. And so,
Okay.
and so that's all true. You know what I mean? But it was nothing. There were no directives from the band or above. Like, hey, it started there, and so I think there was a bad situation that happened. This, a road crew member of ours said something mean and nasty, and you could assume what
Yeah,
happened
it
from there.
spirals from there. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Well,
yeah.
it's
So I
hard to,
think
but I
that's
think
what.
I think it's important
Yeah,
that you say though that too. There's that feeling that Bradford probably had that Billy was acknowledging him, and the you know what I mean. Or I'm sure there was a hero, kind of feeling from Bradford towards Billy, or you know what I mean, that kind of thing. So if nothing else, more than even a rude roadie is probably the fact that there wasn't a love fest between those two was probably what hurt Bradford more. Me, no, just
maybe
knowing
I can't.
Bradford. Do
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
yeah,
Like, but
yeah, yeah, yeah.
knowing Bradford as I know him, or I knew him at the time. I haven't talked to him in years, but I'm sure there was probably more. Or even I've been opening band. I've been opening band more than headlining band in some cases, and yeah, and it's like, oh my god, I get to open for my favorite band, and they just
And they don't give a shit.
they walk right through you. I've been a headlining band and I haven't seen our openers play too. I've gone out, and gotten dinner because that's the only time I have to eat for that day. The only time I can have time by myself. And so
Yeah,
I've missed
yeah,
openers, and I've seen it on both sides, so I've been on both sides of those kind of fences too. So it's
yeah,
hard.
yeah, yeah. And it's all so silly. That's the
Of
thing. The whole
course.
situation,
Yeah.
and that's what I'll say.
Yeah.
It's like being out of it now. All of it is just so
Oh
silly.
gosh. Yeah.
And at the end of the day, now I'm back as a musician where I don't have any roadies. I don't have, and it's like I'm loading my gear in my car and
Oh yeah.
driving to the fucking gig,
Yeah.
and like, what I mean, dealing with the attitudes, and but, what I mean,
Yeah.
and you really have to sit there and go, why am I doing this? Because I love it, because this is what a musician does. This is what regardless
Yeah.
of how many people are out there, what you're doing. And so yeah, that, like I said, so now that I'm outside of that kind of framework,
Mm-hmm.
which I found very necessary to do. I was like, I got to get out of here. Like this whole type of dynamic, the types of relationships that you have with your bandmates, the types of relationships that you have with your management company, like, this is not for me anymore. I got to do something different. I got to change the channel. I just can't do this anymore. Yeah.
I totally understand. Yeah, I've had, just you know, been so lucky in the career that I've had, or just been able to play the shows. But there was a point where, we weren't playing a festival, but all of our friends were playing a festival, and my wife in the festival program was like, "Oh, come backstage, come hang out," and I was like, and I went back and it just felt uncomfortable. I was like, this, it feels like I'm at the office Christmas party for the office I don't work at anymore. It's like, I'm not
Yeah.
just going to go show up
Yeah.
just to be, but I wasn't mad about it. I was happy. I was happy to not be at that office anymore. But it's that kind of thing. You realize, like, these are workplace relationships as much as it feels like rock and roll and everything else. It's like, at the end of the
Yeah.
day, this is just another job. You just get, it's another check. It's another place to be, and all those kind of things. It's like, okay, it totally makes sense. The switch up, like
Yeah.
you said, turn the channel. It makes sense.
Well, the music industry, is, and these are actually, and I mention these because I just feel like they're important things to kind of put out there in the world. And it's not complaining, what I mean, or, I would say, but I think that, maybe people on the outside of it don't really understand of how unregulated the music industry, and how much kind of labor exploitation is taking place, and
Yeah.
in almost every single sector. You know what I mean? Where
Yeah.
it's a, it's a tough situation, where you think like, wow, like how do people like deal with this, and the reason that we do is because we love the art so much. We love, like when you all, get to sit down and play that gig, and I get to hang out and hear your music, and and play with William, and go, wow, this is just, I still love doing this,
Mhm.
and it makes all the kind of the tough stuff worth it.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I know that feeling. I think I did the math one time on a tour that we were doing. We were being paid well at. It's like, but if you still take the hours put in, like, well, we drove 10 hours today, and and
Yeah,
you
yeah.
divide it all up, it's like it's still well below minimum wage. By the time it's all said and done. But that
Isn't that
again,
crazy?
but
Yeah,
that's
I
not
know.
why that's not why we were doing it. You know what I mean? That's again, like you said, it's there's so much passion and just love for it. I mean, I do it for free. That was always the thing too in my head. It's like I would do this for nothing. I do it, and I do that now all the time. I play, and go out there, and it's just like, oh yeah, this isn't for the
Yeah.
money. It's about
Yeah. I mean, I
sharing that
guess that,
energy.
you know what, for me is, and this is just like total like honesty type of stuff, is I think what became, and kind of my realizations and my perspectives on things changed now that I mean, I've been out of the band for a year and a half or so, so you start seeing like, because to survive, even in a good situation, and I'm sure you have similar experiences where you have to repress a lot of things throughout maybe a tour or something, just to go like, because I got to get through the day. I got to play the gig. All
Hmm.
this shit bothered me or whatever, or something about this dynamic or way that this person spoke to me at the record label, right? You know what I mean? Any of these things that,
Sure.
and
Yeah.
so, and then once you kind of, okay, like now I can kind of start processing this stuff and things, you know, things leave, you know, I think like if I could go back to the time when I joined the band, I don't want to say that I wouldn't have done it because so many wonderful things emerged. I wouldn't be talking to you now. I wouldn't know William. I wouldn't know all these people, all these amazing relationships that I have in my life.
Mm.
I would, so I am thankful. But I didn't, I think what was weird for me in thinking about it is that like, I joined a project that was never going to be my own.
No matter how much
And that's
time
really not
and
my,
energy.
and I think
Mm.
that I realized, oh, that's something in life that's important to me. And so, which is why I was like, okay, so even though, because sometimes I look at it and go, should I just compartmentalize my mind a little bit more and been like, because the punk, it's not like now the band is 10 working 10 months a year. It's like 6 months a year or something. You have 6 months to do whatever you want. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And it's really, but when you're there, you don't feel like that or something. I don't know how to explain it. Or like you come back from being on tour, you're like tweaked for a month just from like being gone and like got to get your head back in shape. But I don't know. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
so,
Well, I mean, for
but
yeah.
are you just so immersed in that mentality that you're living in this bubble? And then
Even when
until
you're
you're,
out of it, your
yeah,
brain's still there. That's the hardest part for someone to understand too. I think is that even when you're not on tour, you're still on tour. You're always
or you're like, I'm that guy from that band.
oh, got it.
And
Right, right.
yeah, I'm signed to Sub Pop Records. Hey, don't you, you know what I mean?
Well,
Or
yeah, and people talk to you like, are they talking to me because I'm the Smashing Pumpkins guy, or are they talking to me because I'm Jeff? Because who do they
well,
see when they see
absolutely.
me?
And well,
You
and
know.
you see once you're gone and how people disappear, right?
Hmm.
I mean, like you'd be, I'm not, I mean, you wouldn't be shocked, but like you're just like, wow, people just disappear.
Yeah.
Like, don't need you anymore. And,
That's when
but
it's
it's fine.
a workplace thing. That's when you find out like, oh, those were work
Yeah.
friends. Like I wouldn't expect, Debbie from accounting to, to call and ask how my day's going. You know what I mean? I was there because she was paid to talk to me and I was, and that's it. That was her job.
Exactly.
That was her
Well,
job.
or I mean, or they can't make money off of you anymore, so
Hmm. Yeah.
whatever,
Yeah.
blah blah
Yeah.
blah. But like I said, I think what I found out, and this has nothing to do with Smashing Pumpkins or anything like that.
Sure.
It's really more about me. Is that, oh, I like to be in control of of kind of what I'm doing, and so when I was pursuing like a life in academia, yes, you're eventually going to work for a university, you're going to have to do things, but as far as like your research, what you're writing your articles about, what you're writing your book about, is like that's your work, and no
Hmm.
one can take that away from you. And so I think that's ultimately, like, from an artistic standpoint, those are things that I realized, oh, that's important to me. So even though I'm not playing sold out arenas, you know and I'm playing in front of 50 people at Permanent Records, you know what I mean? But
But it's you. It's yours.
That it's me, and that's I know it's a crazy mentality, but
oh yeah, no, I totally
Yeah.
understand it. Oh man, Jeff, thank you so much for taking the time. I really appreciate it. This has been
Yeah.
so fun. Hopefully, we get to play some more music together.
Me too. Yeah, I hope
Be
so
great.
too. Okay.
Awesome. Where do you want people to follow you? What's the best way for plugs? Where do you like people to find out more about your music?
Instagram is kind of the only social media that I use. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
What's your handle here? Say it on here so everyone hears it.
It's JJJ Schroeder.
Okay.
3 J's in my last name.
Awesome. And there'll be a link down in the show notes too. So yeah, everybody go follow Jeff there and keep an eye out for more shows in the future. Woohoo! All right, we did it. Thank you, Jeff, so much for coming on the show. It was such a pleasure playing the show with you and William a few months back. And now it's getting to sit down and chat with you on this show. And make sure everybody go see Jeff on tour this July, where he will be playing with Adam Miller from the Chromatics. They will be in Los Angeles on July 20th, an intimate evening of ambient guitar. On July 20th at the Philosophical Research Society, July 26th at Four Star Theater in San Francisco. And then you got July 24th in Seattle. And then you're going to go see him at Holocene in Portland on July 23rd, right? Sounds like a good idea. Go do it. And again, follow him on the Instagrams, JJJ Schroeder, SCHROEDER. And have fun, be well, go jump in a lake, go jump in a body of water, swing your kids around, eat some food that makes you feel like you cooked it outside, or maybe cook food outside. I don't know. Do whatever you do. Why are you asking me for? I can't help you here. It's 4th of July. It's America, 2025. This is what we got. Do with it what you will, and be safe. And I'll see you on Monday. Bye.
Class, we were all just like these misfit Orange County musicians. Yeah, I remember. Oh yeah, for sure.